All right, ladies and gentlemen, Ball Dominant is back. I spent a couple of weeks taking a break because the offseason is very slow. And then we got hit with probably the biggest trade this offseason with Karl Anthony Towns being headed to the New York Knicks and Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, a first round pick from the Detroit Pistons that's protected until 2027 and then becomes a second round pick. So not really a pick, a fake first round pick, but yeah, man, Ball Dominant is back. And what better way to start than with our first special guest of the channel in general? You know what I'm saying? D-Have is back on the channel. When we get together, fireworks happen. You know what I'm saying? So, D-Have, how you doing, man?
Absolutely, man. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here.
That's great to hear, man. And I'm not gonna lie, when I found out this trade happened, I had to get a call. I had no clue. I wasn't at home. I had to run past my grandmother's house real quick, take care of some things. So as soon as I get home, my little brother calls me. He's like, "Did you see the trade?" I'm like, "What trade?" I'm thinking it's NFL because my little brother is a more of an NFL guy. He's like, "Yeah, Cat just got traded to the Knicks." And I'm like, I had no, so I tried to record for like a small YouTuber like myself, I got to get those
Right.
videos out before those bigger guys get them out. Cause as
I
soon as
hear you.
those videos come out, there's no
It's
attention for me.
over. Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
But
Well, I actually similar like kind of thing. I read it from I was scrolling on Twitter and I read it and I immediately thought this is a troll account. Like, cause
yeah,
I didn't recognize the account. And then I look at Shams actually tweeted it and I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah. I did the
exactly.
same thing. I hopped right on and got my thoughts together and kind of fired up the recording. But yeah, crazy, crazy news that no one was expecting. I don't even think Cat was expecting it.
Yeah,
You saw
exactly.
his tweet there, so
Yeah, and it's tough to see, man. It's really tough to see because we got a Timberwolves team who this is their most successful year since 2004, and Karl Anthony Towns was the guy who's been through multiple rebuilds. The post Jimmy Butler era, and now leading into the Anthony Edwards era, where he's had to change his role multiple times. He had to go from a number one to a number two. He's had to go from a center to a power forward. So to ship him off like that after it's just you just now are starting to see the outcome that you've been working for and you've been hoping for, and now to ship him off the offseason after, it's a tough industry, man, and the second apron is the biggest bully in the NBA in my opinion. So it's tough to think about.
yeah, but crazy. Like for both sides, even the Knicks. Like me as a Sixers fan, I have a very much vested interest in what the Knicks are doing at all times these days.
100%.
And like I was just like, after I saw that, I'm like, I just immediately my like stomach dropped. I'm like, oh no. I thought the Sixers were kind of on an even kind of playing field here, and now I had to rethink everything. And it's like one of those things. Just when you think everything's settled down, and you just get this bomb. And yeah, for Cat especially, it's pretty unfortunate for him. I would say, depending on how it all works out. You could look at it as an opportunity in a bigger market to kind of reinvent maybe your reputation or whatever it may be. But I just think, yeah, we'll talk about the trade later. But yeah, I just think it's just a out of nowhere situation. Like you said, Cat been through so many things in Minnesota. Getting Rudy Gobert in, having to play power forward. He was seen as to me, kind of the OG of this team and someone who would be a wolf for life. So it seemed like
Yeah.
he didn't really know what was going to happen either. So it's pretty unfortunate in that regard.
Now, for this episode of today's Ball Dominant episode, first off, before we get started, I'm gonna try and upload a lot more episodes of Ball Dominant this season coming up. It was a little harder for me last season because I didn't really have the equipment. Now I can just really because my first couple of weeks on YouTube, I was my phone and my girlfriend's laptop just airdropping 10-minute increments into trying to make like a 35 minute video. Now we actually got the equipment, so that makes it a lot better and it makes it a lot easier now. So we're definitely going to try and get more episodes out. In this episode, though, we're going to be talking about some things we saw on Media Day. As you know, Media Day was today, Monday, September 30th. We're also going to be talking about the trade. We're going to be talking about the Atlantic Division, which is something I was going to do last week. And I'm so glad I didn't do it because now the Knicks are kind of flipped upside down with their new center acquisition, with the new news that Mitchell Robinson may miss half the season. So there's definitely a lot to talk about. And I'm so glad I just waited. I'm so glad I just waited. And what else are we going to be talking about? I think that's it. I think that's it. Yeah, that's the episode.
A
So
lot of stuff to dive into there. Yeah.
yeah, definitely is. And we definitely got a treat for everybody that's watching, man. I'm very excited to get into these things. So, first, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves point of view. You bring in Dante DiVincenzo, you bring in Julius Randle. I know a lot of people are talking about the fit. A lot of people are talking about how they should not have traded Carl Anthony Towns, especially getting this close to the NBA Finals. You go to the Western Conference Finals. But I truly think that the direct motive behind this trade was the salary cap purposes. Carl Anthony Towns is a player in about 3 or 4 years is going to be making north of $60 million a year. Right now, he is the eighth highest paid player in the NBA. And when you look at Carl Anthony Towns, I don't think he gives you the production of the eighth highest player in the NBA. Now, that is not a slight to Carl Anthony Towns, and this is a very talented league where even if you are the eighth highest paid player and you are still an all-star caliber player, $60 million, that's hard to justify. That's Giannis, Jokic, Luca money. That's not a Carl Anthony Towns money. So I understand what the Timberwolves are going for, but I feel like the direction or the consensus around the media was they were going to at least give this one more season to see if they really had the roster to go all the way. So what's your thoughts on the Timberwolves and how they went about this situation?
Yeah, a couple things. So, for one, I think, like you said, there was obviously some second apron, foresight to say, hey, maybe in a few years this won't look like the best contract in the league. I certainly think maybe in a few years you could say this will be well outside the top 10 of highest paid contracts. But for right now, at least, I do think the Wolves have, gained significant value back in particularly with Randall and DiVincenzo. You address some of the issues in the draft with, guys like Rob Dillingham coming in and Terrence Shannon Jr., maybe some taking some scoring pressure and some, shot creation pressure off of Anthony Edwards. I think that was one of their bigger issues for me in the Wolves postseason last year was you just need a guy that can, late in the shot clock, go get a bucket, right? And they just outside of Ant and guys that need to be set up to do that, like Carl Anthony Towns, you just really didn't have that. And so maybe this is a situation, like you said, where they see an opportunity to go get another one of those guys in DiVincenzo, as well as replace some of the value that you could for Carl Anthony Towns. I don't think anyone's going to make the case that Randall is a on par with as far as how good he is with Carl Anthony Towns. But at the end of the day, you bring in an all NBA caliber, all star caliber power forward to replace him. We'll have to talk about the fit and things like this. But from the Wolves' perspective, I think it, obviously out of the blue, like we talked about, but really all things considered, kind of makes a lot of sense, right? I think, like I said, it is good value for Carl Anthony Towns on that contract. And I think you replace at least most of the value with Julius Randle. They're obviously very different players, but I think DiVincenzo is a very underrated pickup in this deal. You could look at it and say Randle and Towns. Oh, okay. Well, DiVincenzo is kind of a throw in there, but I do not think that is the case. I think he provides so much, shot creation and perimeter spacing for this team in really any lineup you could throw him in.
And one of the things that a lot of people talk about in the NBA is you may have a starting lineup of maybe two or three guys that may not be the best shooters in the NBA, and now automatically the spacing is terrible. I think floor spacing has a lot more to do than just hitting the league average three ball. I think the way that Julius Randle can work inside the mid range game and make the proper pass, because one thing I did was go back and look how he played with Mitchell Robinson, is also not a floor spacing big, somebody that works inside the restricted area. It didn't look too bad. Julius Randle playing around the elbow, playing around the top of the free throw line, creating, getting downhill, finding Mitchell Robinson in the dunking spot. That's something that can work with Rudy Gobert. And then when you have guys like Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley, or whether Rob Dillingham decides that he wants to be a league average 3-point shooter when he comes into the NBA, and now you have Dante DiVincenzo, who put on a 3-point clinic in the playoffs, there are multiple 3-point shooters you can put around Julius Randle to the point where he can create for the guys around him. Nas Reed is still going to be a guy that can space the floor, So outside of just Julius Randle not being the best 3-point shooter, he's still a great screener. He's still great in the mid range game. He still knows how to create to attack the defense and take the attention off of guys that are in the corner because he's going to be afraid down there. So that has a lot more to do with floor spacing than just are you able to hit the three ball at a consistent level? And that's something I didn't look at in that way when I first got the news. When I first got the news, I started looking at it, I'm like, this trade was pointless. But then when you think about it into a deeper way of, instead of just thinking about, does this make this team a championship team? Does this make this team a championship team? This trade is a lot deeper than we want to win a championship, especially for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I still like it. I still think it's going to take some time, because Carl Anthony Towns, in my opinion, is a better fit next to Rudy Gobert, and that still took a long time for them to get their offense together. So I think Julius Randle is going to take a little bit of time. He's definitely, I think he's injured right now. I think he's going to miss maybe the first month or two of the season. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I know we're not talking about the Knicks yet, but opening night is going to be crazy. I can't wait. I
Well,
cannot wait.
just to add one of the, absolutely Julius Randle, in regards to the spacing of, teammates around him, he is absolutely a force inside the arc. He does have the ability to, knock down a three. Maybe he takes a little bit more than you like, but inside the arc, as far as that's concerned, he is a far more, in my opinion, more complete, sort of versatile kind of player offensively than Cat, with his playmaking ability. And like you said, the ability to command double teams is big for Julius Randle. When he gets on the interior and he is, scoring efficiently, which he obviously can do, whether it's driving left, whether it's, operating out of the post or around the nail or elbow, like you said, he is going to command doubles, and he absolutely has the vision and talent to, get the ball out to a guy like DiVincenzo, out to a guy like Dillingham, if, like you said, he, is able to be a sufficient 3-point shooter. So I think, his presence is a little bit different than Cat's, as far as an off the ball, or, just a kind of an interior force in general. I think Cat, like you said, it took a while to, get his rhythm going with, playing off of Gobert, but I think the fit is interesting. We'll have to see how it works. Chris Finch is certainly going to have to be pretty creative in this regard, but overall, I think there's just a lot more, dynamic, like, playmaking and, just advantages to Julius Randle as opposed to Cat. They're very different offensive players, but I think you can utilize a guy like, Julius Randle to command a lot of double teams, take some, pressure off of Anthony Edwards, like I said, in, that regard. So I do think, they will have to work him in, certainly in kind of a different way. But, as far as the presence that he brings, just on the ball, off the ball, it's very unique. And, certainly once he comes back from injury, yeah, opening night's going to be fun. But once he comes back from injury, there will be some growing pains. But I think overall, I think Chris Finch has the work cut out for him, but the result could be deadly.
And I was watching a podcast earlier today, and someone said this may be just the throwaway year in a sense for the Minnesota Timberwolves, which I can see at an extent, where people say, well, you're getting Julius Randle maybe a month or two into the season. One, you're bringing a guy who's never played in the offense on top of now having a month or two without him in the offense. So that's what's going to make it a lot difficult, especially in the Western Conference. That's going to lead to some losses, let's be honest. But I still think this can work. And if it does work, if we start to see it towards the end of the season and going into the playoffs and it starts to work, I don't think it's the worst idea to re-sign Julius Randle, especially since he's probably going to opt out of his player option, only making $30 million a year. When he's looking around the NBA and he's seeing how much these guys are getting paid, he's either going to say, either you're going to pay me what I think I'm worth, or I'm going to walk. And now you're giving up somebody who you drafted number one in the 2015 NBA draft for Dante DiVincenzo in a pick that's going to become a second rounder. You don't want to do that. Julius Randle is still an all-star caliber player. He's still an all NBA caliber player. So I'm really hesitant to say that the Minnesota Timberwolves are still the same team they once were, because I still think Carl Anthony Towns fits a lot better with New York and what they're trying to do. And I don't know if I can say that just yet about Julius Randle, because in the end of the day, we have praised him, but there are moments where he just completely stops the offense. He does have a bad shot diet. He does show his body language on the floor when he is not particularly going well with what the offense is trying to do. And those type of things could really affect a young player like Anthony Edwards, who's going to be leading the charge of this team. And he doesn't have a guy like Carl Anthony Towns next to him, who has been in the system for so long and has been the number one player to show him, like, look, man, this is how we're going to do things. Instead, Julius Randle's going to be pouting. I don't know how that's supposed to go. I don't know how that's going to go. So it's definitely up in the air in my opinion, but I think if everything can go well, especially it being a contract year for Julius Randle, it can still lead to a lot of wins and it can still lead to a deep playoff run, but only time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one thing to add to that, you mentioned the word like throwaway year, and you could look at it as that, or you could look at it as now they have kind of a spot on the roster that is taken up by a player of Julius Randle's caliber that is going to be expiring in the near future that you could look at as more flexibility to this roster overall. Let's say it doesn't work out with Randle, and you move some things around, and now all of a sudden you got a bunch of cap space. If you look at my Sixers with the James Harden situation, it's a similar thing that happened last year. People say we got fleeced in that trade, but really what Daryl Morey was doing was to, open up the options as far as this roster goes, make a move for the future in bringing in, a bunch of, contracts that maybe you don't see these people fitting long term, but hey, now you can either, use all these expiring salaries to trade for somebody. Now you can, look towards the offseason and free agency, what the Sixers did with Paul George. I just think it opens up your opportunities for different kinds of things. Flexibility is big in this league, and if you're a team that has a bunch of guys locked in long term for on big contracts, like the Timberwolves were just a couple of days ago, that really limits your flexibility, especially when you're approaching the second apron or crossing the second apron. So I think just being able to make different kinds of decisions within the near future is going to be big for the Timberwolves because now they're in a situation where, if this does work out, we can extend them. If it doesn't, maybe we move some things around and, try to, regroup on this core here,
I'm having a brain fart of what I was about to say. Oh yeah, okay. So there was some conversation about the Minnesota Timberwolves not being the head place to go as a free agent, with them being a smaller market team. And I would have been okay with that statement if they didn't have a guy like Anthony Edwards. I think Anthony Edwards is on the trajectory to be one of the better players in the league. And I mean like top 5 to top 7 in the league at his peak, and he just looks like a guy you would want to play with. This is a guy who rallies behind his teammates, a guy who knows how to take the blame when it's needed, and he just looks like a great leader. So I have a hard time believing that Kevin Durant would want to play with Anthony Edwards. I have a hard time believing that. So that's just like something where I look at it and be like, why wouldn't anyone want to play with Anthony Edwards? This is a guy who's young. He's going to defend, so he's going to show effort on both sides. And that's the type of player who's going to motivate his teammates to do the same thing. You're going to see your number one guy give it his all day in and day out with plays like that game-saving block he had last season that was all over House of Highlights. Plays like that, or plays like him dunking all over John Collins. Those are type of plays that you look at, especially if you're a teammate and be like, this guy's giving it 110% night in and night out. Why can't I do the same? So I think a lot of players are going to want to play with Anthony Edwards.
Absolutely. And if you look at his, infectious personality, that's another thing. A lot of, it appears from, excuse me, from us, at least from the outside looking in, this is a guy you'd want to be around. He's a fun guy. And I think, he, like I said, infectious personality. Another thing is when you spend, a lot of these superstars at the Olympics, you spend time around these guys, you get to know them a little bit. Maybe that could, affect their chances of wanting to play in your small market city. We see it all the time. If you look at the big three Miami Heat, I know that's, obviously a better market, but, those guys were said, rumored to have really kind of came up with that kind of plan at the Olympics. So, this is something that we see all the time. We actually do see, more and more of these, high marquee free agents end up going to smaller markets. We saw it, um, having a blank. I just had one in my head, but even if you look at what not to bring it back to my Sixers, but Paul George was rumored to want to stay on the West Coast. Not historically for our franchise, not a big free agent hotspot, even though it is a bigger city. So it just depends on the player in their career, like what's the most important thing for them at that time. If they can get similar value contract wise to where they would somewhere else, maybe if it's a better market. If this gives you the best chance to win and you're a Kevin Durant coming off a contract and maybe this will be your last contract or whatever the case may be, you're requesting a trade, you look to the best opportunity to win a lot of times. And so when it's your last go around, like Kevin Durant, that, like you said, that could be an option. No question.
100%, man. And if you were to grade this pickup for the Minnesota Timberwolves before we move on to the New York Knicks? What would you give it?
I would give the Timberwolves side of things a solid A because I do think overall value wise, they add a lot of flexibility to, their financial situation, and you replace, one of the top tier bigs in the league with good value in my opinion across the board, especially, the DiVincenzo thing is big for me. If he wasn't involved in this trade, I'd probably give it somewhere close to an F. Like he really moves the needle for me in this package, and certainly a player that works super well in any lineup off the ball. And I just think Randall, if everything works out correctly, it could provide similar value to what Cat did on different areas of the floor. But regardless, I give it a solid A.
I would say maybe a B minus to a C. And it's you kind of hit the nail on the head because it's a if Julius Randle does work out, because
Big if. Yeah.
there is a lot of if you look maybe 2 years into the future, and the Minnesota Timberwolves have not made it past the first round in the next 2 years, you Julius Randle does not work out. You have to pay him because you gave up Carl Anthony Towns. And you guys just have not gotten to the level that you guys were at with Carl Anthony Towns. Then it becomes really bad because now you're probably locked into a deal with Julius Randle. And it was already a lot of teams that weren't the most excited to trade for Julius Randle. And now, if he's still not playing to the level that you would want him to play, it only makes it tougher. So I think there's a lot of ifs for this Timberwolves team. And once again, this can all happen. It's very realistic to say that Julius Randle could fit in this offense, but there's also a really big if it just starts going downhill and he's inefficient again in the playoffs. He's taking bad shots. The body language is there. All these things can happen. So that's why I'm not too high on it. I'm not too low on it, because if this goes well, it could be really well. You free up cap space. You bring in a guy in Julius Randle who plays well in the offense, but then if it goes bad, it could go really bad. So I would say I'm about middle tier in the trade for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But the next team we're going to be talking about is the New York Knicks, who have been probably the most aggressive team this offseason. Just to run it back real fast, they re-signed Jalen Brunson, who left, I think, $113 million on the table, and re-signed a year early than expected. You re-sign OG Anunoby. You trade Mikal Bridges, which you send 5 first-round picks in Bojan Bogdanovic to the Brooklyn Nets. You also bring in Carl Anthony Towns, who you trade Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle for. There is no secret that this New York Knicks team is prepared to go all in. And after the performance that Jalen Brunson had in the playoffs, I don't blame them. And you bring in a guy like Carl Anthony Towns, who fits so well in this offense. I think um, I think there can be a world where he plays next to Mitchell Robinson. He's obviously going to be playing the 5 for maybe the first half of the season, but with how this offense opens up with how Jalen Brunson plays, which is a lot of in the mid range, a lot of back to the basket for a point guard, a lot of getting downhill and maybe stopping on a dime and hitting a mid range shot. A lot of that works because there is space on the floor. Now, if you have a projecting starting lineup of Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, and Carl Anthony Towns, there are shooters all around the floor. There are guys who can make decisions on a quick note, like Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, Carl Anthony Towns. There can be movement all around the perimeter. This offense, in my opinion, becomes at least a top 7 offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fit with Cat, like, I talked about this in my video, but the biggest issue going into the year, with the roster they had a few days ago, was the center position. Mitchell Robinson's injury, which now we know is a little bit worse than we thought. When we talk about the backup 5 situation, I mean, they do have Precious Achua there, but even if him and Robinson are healthy, is this the center duo that you think can get you all the way to the top? Wasn't so sure about that given Mitchell Robinson's history with injuries and his reliability issues. Now you just flat out solve the center issue. I mean, you bring in a top 5, at minimum top 10 big man in the league, and Carl Anthony Towns, who has a very specific skill set, which, like you said, is spacing the floor better than maybe any big man in history. Okay, and like you said, Jalen Brunson, and like, he needs space to operate, and so now you could play 5 out realistically and feels super good about it, even if Josh Hart doesn't shoot that all that well. Like he can crash the boards after a shot and get those offensive rebounds opportunities. He can
Phenomenal
you know,
off-ball screener as well.
absolutely
Phenomenal.
all the dirty work things that you would expect Josh Hart to do. It doesn't necessarily need to be five guys standing on the 3 point line when Brunson's doing his thing. And also the pick and pop game with Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson is going to be I'd expect to be absolutely lethal. I mean, when you have as good of a mid range player as Jalen Brunson who can pull up out of those perimeter screener roles and then potentially just basically play make for others and cat rolling to the slipping out rolling to the top of the key, like it's just going to be it's going to be such a dangerous offense. They're going to get so many open shots, and cat just only adds so much gravity to that situation. And as far as the big man situation, it's just completely solved in my opinion now. We could see potentially by the deadline a Mitchell Robinson trade happen to where the Knicks maybe recount for some of that wing or guard depth that they lost with losing DiVincenzo. We could see them, maybe get a more reliable backup five that you can trust night to night. It's just I will say though for the Knicks, as far as flexibility goes, like they're kind of out of moves here, and so besides Mitchell Robinson, I think this is their team, and so if it doesn't work out, like they're locked into all these guys long term. Not much, flexibility as far as that goes. They traded a bunch of their picks in the Mikal Bridges trade. I do think there are some injury concerns with the depth as far as Mitchell Robinson and OG Anunoby. If they go down or if one of those guys goes down, you
It
do
puts a
have
big wrench in this team.
that's a big deal. And so,
It
you
is.
do lose the Dante DiVincenzo, bench depth, but you do have Deuce McBride and Precious Achua at the big man. And so maybe you could say you need another forward or a wing, but at the end of the day, I mean, this is on paper, maybe other than Boston, the best starting five in the entire league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I would definitely say maybe like number 3. I would comfortably off the top of my head say the third best starting lineup in the league because I depending on how OKC runs their lineup out there, I think they could be number 2. But I
That's the
mean,
only
yeah, I
other
think
one. That's the only
yeah,
other one that I would even put up there. Yeah.
exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, I think the depth can be a problem, but when you have a starting lineup that's so good, in my opinion, I think the same with the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics don't have this egregious amount of depth to where Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser are going to be expecting to get 20 minutes a night. No, they can probably get 14, 15 because the starting lineup is so good that you can mix those rosters up throughout a full 48-minute game to where it may not even matter. But let's say you keep Jalen Brunson on the floor at all times with a perimeter defender next to him, whether it be Mikel or OG. Same with Karl Anthony Towns. Keep him on the floor at all times with a perimeter defender, maybe Mikel or OG. So let's say if Jalen Brunson comes off, Mikel comes off as well. And then you keep OG and Cat at the same time. And then when Jalen Brunson comes back in, you bring in Mikel. So you have a solid defender next to your primary scorer when they're in the game. So I think you can fluctuate the starters with the rotational players at every single point in a game. And I think it does not really matter how much you have off the bench, at least until someone gets hurt. Let's hopefully the Knicks do not have any injuries because that's where it can get a little shaky. Because we saw in the playoffs, Tom Thibodeau is going to play his guys. He's going to play his guys. He's going to give them excessive minutes, and that may lead to some injuries. And I think that's one of the things that makes me scratch my head because after seeing what happened in the playoffs last year, you would probably have wanted to keep some depth just because of that very reason. Because I thought the Knicks were on an Eastern Conference Finals run if there wasn't for any injuries or if they would have maybe stayed a little bit more healthy. I think if Jalen Brunson doesn't go down, if OG doesn't go down, they definitely had enough to beat the Pacers. So that's what makes me kind of rethink it. Like, I understand the Karl Anthony Towns move 100%, but I do think Mitchell Robinson may get sent out for some more quality guys. And there's a really nice big man market out there right now. I mean, I think the Lakers would love to have a starting center. The Pelicans desperately need one because they're talking about Zion Williamson playing the 5. There's teams out there who could use a big, and I think you can get a solid return for a guy like Mitchell Robinson, healthy or not. So I think you can bring that in.
Yeah, it's almost like Mitchell Robinson has become the new Robert Williams III on the trade market. It was him for a while. We'll
Yeah,
have to see what happens there. But as far as the rotation, like you said, I mean, a lot of these guys can guard like three positions. Like, and so when let's say you want to sub out Ananobi, right? Well, then you just slide Hart or Mikal Bridges to his position, whatever it may be that night, and put in power. I mean, they still, I do believe, was Keanu Bates Diop involved in the trade? Do you know?
Keita Bates Diop. I think he's still in the rotation. I think he's still in the rotation.
So
I
yeah,
can actually
whatever it is, if you slide him at the four, you want to give Cat a break, slide Precious Achiuwa in. A lot of these guys could just cover it. Like the Celtics ran a lot of times like six-man rotation throughout a lot of these playoff games, and so you can comfortably do that if you have enough versatility within your lineup, where one guy goes out, other guy can slide to his spot, and you feel pretty confident about that. As far as like you said, Mitchell Robinson could be on the block. I mean, I think Precious Achua, could be a serviceable, excuse me, backup five. The thing is, this roster is just a little bit top heavy right now. But assuming no injuries, which is what you have to do, you can't really predict those kinds of things.
yeah.
This is like the maybe one of the better 7-man, certainly starting fives. If you want to say 7-man rotation, like this team is top three in the East, like minimum. I mean, they could maybe even be better than that. And so their ceiling is just tremendous. But hopefully, knock on wood, like you said, no injuries or anything like that. We don't want to see anything like that. So, but either way, this is an absolute W for the Knicks in terms of their versatility and their lineups go, and not relying so much on Mitchell Robinson is just going to be, it's a night and day difference. And all these people online, I'm sure you've seen the take that, oh well, and I'm a Sixers fan, by the way. Oh well, Cat's soft and he's food for Embiid. It's like, what does that have to do with the Knicks? Like, as far as like their center issue 2 days ago, they just don't have
It's
that
way better
issue
now.
anymore. Like whether or not Embiid's better than Cat doesn't have anything to do with this trade. And so like I don't know. I just think this is a slam dunk for the Knicks. No pun intended.
Okay, so after about 31 minutes, we're about 31 minutes into this episode. I want to ask everybody in the comment section, everybody watching, just a quick trivia. Can you name the three youngest players ever to make an all defensive team? And if you get it right in the comments, I will like your comment. There we go.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to NBA Media Day. We had a few clips that I want to talk about. The clips will be posted, or the clips will be put in the video right after I bring them up. The first clip I want to show you guys is this one.
To be honest, it was unique. They just didn't put me in a position to make it unique. I was in a position where I was playing not my position, and being able to be here and Coach Malone allowing me to be able to use my speed, use my transition skill to be able to make other guys better. Makes the game easy for everybody surround me, and that's what I love to do best.
Okay, so Russell Westbrook made some comments that he was not used to be unique in his past roles on NBA teams, whether it be the Lakers or it be the Clippers. And I do think that is correct. I think that there could have been different ways to use Russell Westbrook, but in the end of the day, Russell Westbrook's game, in my opinion, is something that he needs to have the ball in his hand. And especially at this point in his career, I don't think Russell Westbrook being the main guy to really initiate everything on the floor while he's on the floor is going to produce to some high level basketball or to some high level offense. And I don't think he has accepted that just yet. I think he's accepted the fact that he has a smaller role on an NBA team, but I don't think he's accepted the fact that he is not the guy to officiate to initiate offense anymore. And I think that's something we see with a lot of NBA players, because I truly think Bradley Beal should come off the bench this season. You bring in Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, you start Grayson Allen at the 3, KD at the 4, and Nurkic at the 5. I think Bradley Beal could have the talent and could have a really solid bounce back year if he comes off the bench. You already got your money. So what's the point of trying to be like, yeah, I'm not coming off the bench, I'm playing for a contract? You got 50 million coming in for the next 2-3 seasons.
No
So
trade clause too, by the way.
literally, so you're not
Yeah.
going anywhere. Nobody wants you. So just play off the bench, get your 18, 19 a night, solid efficiency, run an offense while you're on the floor. But that's completely going off topic. I just think NBA players have a tough time realizing where they are in their career. And I just think Russell Westbrook is unaware of the fact that him being used to his highest level of ability is not what's going to produce winning basketball. And he has really failed, in my opinion, of adjusting his game to that standard, or to the point where he can be a quality guy that comes off the bench that fits in seamlessly, you know?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of the things I thought about Russell Westbrook's time with the Clippers was, I thought he really kind of bounced back in some ways as far as his reputation goes when he was with the Lakers. I mean, we saw Russell Westbrook's reputation with the Lakers do a complete nosedive, and to a point where people didn't think he should, be on an NBA roster anymore. And so now he goes to the Clippers, and I thought, Coach Lou did as far as him talking about his role, a good job finding roles for him that weren't necessarily traditional to Russ's game. And so I thought overall, you could take away from his time with the Clippers and say he's moving in the right direction as far as a player who could be adapting to some of these newer things that he hasn't really done before. We saw him at times step up in his defensive intensity, which is something that he's not necessarily known for in this league. But as far as the Nuggets go, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Coach Malone decides to employ his both minutes and roll off the bench. I mean, clearly he's going to be the sixth man off on this team, and so I think for the Nuggets specifically, who could use a little bit of pop off the bench and a little bit more, like kind of just athleticism to kind of run a second. I think that could be something that definitely helps them. But as far as Russell Westbrook accepting that that's at the bottom line, that's what his role is, and that's all he is going to be for this team. If Coach Malone asks him, hey, maybe don't take that kind of shot, if he sees him chuck up one of those off the backboard bricks, like it's a bad spot in the game to be doing that. You had to miss an open teammate here. Hey, Jokic is open. That's our guy. Like, is Russell Westbrook going to be willing to put his ego aside and say, yeah, you know what? Winning is more important than me taking that shot right there and, looking like the hero. So it'll be interesting to see if Russell Westbrook's able to do that. We certainly know he's not going to be a great off the ball player. So he's going to have to run this second unit. And whether or not, like you said, he can do it efficiently, I certainly think that is the question. And I would say to Russell's, kind of like for his advantage, like I will say, I think Coach Malone of Mike Malone of anybody will have some of the best odds of getting the best out of Russ of any coach in the league. I think he's just so smart at putting these guys in a system that brings out their strengths and getting the best out of these guys. So if anyone could do it, it's Coach Malone. But I just don't know if anyone could do it.
Yeah. One thing though, he is playing with probably the greatest playmaker in the league, definitely the best playmaking big we've ever seen. And all you have to do is be in the right spot, and he's going to find you. So that is going to make it a lot easier. I think Russell Westbrook is a phenomenal cutter. I think he's still solid when he gets downhill. So that's something that could be used. Jokic, what if he just gets the ball maybe at the elbow, or he has his back to the basket and teams are going to send those doubles? I think Russell Westbrook is really good at finding the perfect time to sprint downhill and get to the basket, and Jokic is going to be able to find him. I think that could work. I also think with the transition passer that Nikola Jokic is, he can find Russell Westbrook coming downhill and getting to the basket. I think there's definitely ways that Russell Westbrook can affect winning, but is he willing to accept that? And we saw it in Los Angeles, definitely. And I hope we're able to see it in Denver, because Russell Westbrook is still a guy I want to see win 100%. I would love to see Russell Westbrook get a championship, because my guy Derrick Rose just retired, and I wasn't able to see that. And that one hurt. That one hurt, man. But yeah, man. I hope Russell Westbrook can adapt well with this Denver Nuggets team. He's probably going to man off this team. I think that's almost a lock. So I'm very excited to see what happens. And next clip we're going to talk about is Ben Simmons and how he feels. I'm going to play the clip right now.
I think people forget, me as a player when I'm healthy. I can play basketball. I'm pretty good, right? So for me, it's just being consistent with that and staying on top.
So Ben Simmons said that people forget who he actually was. And I think there's some truth to that. I'm not an athlete. I'm not an NBA player, so I can't really talk about what goes on in these NBA players' heads. But one thing I can spot out is that it's pretty it's pretty tough to be one of the emerging young stars in the NBA. You know, you're getting compared to a top two greatest player of all time in LeBron James. You start your career off so well. You win Rookie of the Year. You win you're on an all defensive team. You're a multiple time All Star. You're playmaking. You're finishing at the rim. You're being one of the better defenders in the league. I would say a top 10 defender in the league at that point. I think he finished top two in Defensive Player of the Year in 1 year as well. I think that could deal with someone's mental, especially when you're working so hard your entire life to get to one point. Because no matter how good or bad you are in the NBA, it still takes a lot of work to get there. So that's something that I want to look at, especially when we're trying to look at how these players and how they may react to their injuries, because this is something that they've been doing all their life and it's almost like a second nature. So to see that and to see how their body is reacting. I don't know if they still trust their body. I don't know if their mindset is still the same as it once was. So I definitely how remember how good Ben Simmons was, but after being injured for that long, can he still get back to that level? I don't know if I would put money on that.
So yeah, no one understands more than me or remembers Ben Simmons how good he was more than me as a Sixers fan. You know, having to see and getting the opportunity to see Ben Simmons come out of LSU, being so excited for him, and then having him go through that injury early in his career, first season, missing the whole thing, and then DPOY finalists in 2021. Unfortunately, had that blunder with the dunk or missed opportunity for a dunk against the Hawks in that series. Kind of the beginning of the end for Simmons in Philadelphia. And I've kind of come full circle on Ben Simmons as far as wanting to see him succeed. First, when he kind of was holding out, I guess you could say, from the Sixers and having to go through that whole saga, and then him going to Brooklyn, of course, them being just not that far away from Philadelphia. I wanted him and the Nets to not do very well, I'd say, but then as time passed, you kind of heal and learn things, and I think for me personally, and I think most Sixers fans would agree. Now that the Nets aren't really a threat to us, like Ben Simmons, we want to see him succeed. And just as NBA fans in general, I definitely want to see him go back to his former self. He was a all-time great talent as far as like his potential goes. And hopefully, I will say these are interesting comments to make at the start of a contract year, but we could say certainly that you know we all kind of want to see Ben Simmons succeed and go back to his former self, and hopefully he will be in the NBA for many years to come. But I just think the way with these media comments, a lot of times the way it looks and like the timing of it is certainly plays into it. At the time of him making this comment, he's obviously had some pretty interesting years in Brooklyn, and so we do hope that everyone will have to remember how great he was. But at the time, I just think it is a little bit of a bad look when you see year after year these like training montages of him and these 3-point shootouts and the off seasons, and then when it gets time to actually do it on the floor in the regular season, he just seems to disappear. So rooting for him, but maybe just kind of bad timing as far as the comments go on media day, but certainly hope he gets it together.
Yeah, and as a Sixers fan, for you, I can understand where the excitement could be around Ben Simmons. You guys were in a pretty bad situation for so long, and then Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid come back and they look phenomenal. And it's like now these years of bad seasons are finally over, and he gets injured, his confidence blows, he holds out. I can understand where the frustration with Ben Simmons could come from. So I don't hate that at all. So you had something you wanted to say about Joel Embiid in Philly. So I'm gonna let you have the floor, man. Do your thing.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Anytime I get to talk about my Sixers, I will take that opportunity. Joel Embiid, just today, at the time of us recording this is media day. And so, he has said, and I could kind of see it just the way he looks, that Joel Embiid has actually lost 25 to 30 pounds in the offseason of weight. And for me personally, if that is true, he did look a little bit slimmer. We'll have to see, if maybe that's a little bit embellished. I'm not so sure, but either way, if that is true, that is definitely a good thing from the Sixers and for Joel Embiid's health, because as we know, when you're as big as a person as Joel Embiid with struggled with so many lower body injuries, the weight of a player, while it might make him a better basketball player at times, certainly contributes to some injuries we see with Zion Williamson. And him losing weight, I think, is a great thing. Taking care of his body in the right way certainly decreases the chance for high injury risk for like season ending injuries. And so Joel Embiid losing, 25, 30 pounds might make him maybe a little bit, just a smidgen less effective in the paint as far as like interior finishing goes and stuff like that. But he's still going to be bigger and, stronger than most players, even down 30 pounds or so. But I just think it's a great sign to see. If it is true and he can maintain that throughout a season, it severely lowers his risk for big time injuries. And so I did want to note that as far as the media day goes, it's obviously a big deal for me and my Sixers, and I hope it rings true throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the defensive side, because we know Joel Embiid is a drop cover big, and for him to be a little bit more agile, be able to move his feet a little bit more on defense can make this 76ers team a completely different problem, because a lot of Philadelphia's game plan, in my opinion, was send him to Joel Embiid, but if Joel Embiid can attack up more, it makes this defense a lot better, in my opinion. So losing the weight, especially with him and Zion Williamson, who have had injury concerns throughout their career, that's definitely going to open up more possibilities for them in years to come. And I'm really excited to see it, and losing that type of weight for Joel Embiid, I don't think is the biggest concern, because his entire game isn't predicated off of him being dominant down low. He has a great mid-range game. He's great with the ball in his hand. He can put the ball on the floor probably better than any big man in the league. So there's a whole repertoire of tricks and gadgets Joel Embiid has to put the ball in the basket. So it wouldn't really affect me as a fan watching Joel Embiid, because he has such a versatile scoring. He's so versatile at scoring where it doesn't matter if he is a little bit slighter or a little bit slimmer when he's playing down low, because he can give you 50 in a playoff game where he wasn't even down low as much against the Philadelphia 76 or against the New York Knicks. So I definitely think this is a good sign. I definitely think this helps his defense. And I think that he's versatile on offense to the point where he is not leaning solely on his post presence or his dominance down low.
Absolutely. And just two more quick things to note about this. You mentioned the, drop coverage and the send him to Joel kind of mindset for our defense. And, this season in particular, having much more talent on the wing as far as defense goes, really 2 through 4, you have some real athletic, versatile defenders here this season, something very different from years past. So that is another thing I think will help Joel Embiid as far as the defense goes. But as far as him, like you said, being so versatile and fluid and agile as far as big men ball handlers in the league, like when earlier in his career, he was much more of an explosive type of athlete. We've seen him kind of lose a couple steps here in the past couple of years, and really since 2021, he's looked a little bit bigger and a little bit clunkier sometimes. Still one of the more agile bigs in the league, no doubt. But earlier in his career, I'm watching some highlights of him in 2018, 2019, 2021. He looked so much more athletic and explosive on those first steps. And so, if losing 25, 30 pounds can contribute to more of that type of movement from him going downhill, blowing by one-on-one defenders, matchups, like you said, the versatility is endless with him. And, certainly more explosiveness, less weight to carry night to night. As far as the injuries go, this is a very positive sign for Joel Embiid and my 76ers.
All right. So those were the media day comments that we had to make on some of the things we have seen across social media. Now, the final portion of this episode of Ball Dominant, we will be doing our Atlantic preview. So, since we spent a lot of time talking about the New York Knicks, the last thing we're going to do to talk about them is talk about their over under and what ESPN has for them, because ESPN just put out their over under list for every single NBA team, and the New York Knicks over under win record is 53 and a half. Do you have them going over or under?
Yeah, I think if I had to put money on it, I would probably go slightly over. I think this trade makes them a little bit, you know, if you asked me a couple of days ago, I might say 53 is probably a very perfect number. Maybe slightly
Per,
under that.
yeah,
Yeah, the
series.
53 makes a lot of sense before the trade, but I think after the trade, I think you have to go slightly over and give them the benefit of the doubt in this regard. I do think it'll be close. I think it'll be somewhere from 50 to 57, but so 53 makes sense, but I would go slightly over if I had to put money on it.
Yeah, I think this team now, especially, can go 55-27, still be a solid second seed in the Eastern Conference, maybe first seed, depending on how Boston looks. But I still think 55 games to 52 games is where the Knicks lie, in my opinion. I think there's going to be games, especially with some of the injury history last year. I think there's going to be some time where you miss OG Anunoby for maybe a week, maybe a week and a half. That may lead to some losses, but all in all, I think this team should win at least 52 games, at least, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
that's fair.
So the first team in the Atlantic division we're going to be talking about is the defending champion Boston Celtics, whose over/under line is at 58.5 per ESPN. Let me make sure that's correct. Yes, 58.5. To start out, I think Boston has a really good shot at winning 60 games again this year. And one of the narratives around Boston is that they're going to have championship fatigue. And that would be true if there were other champions like the Denver Nuggets or like the Phoenix Suns or the Golden State Warriors. But I think the Boston Celtics still feel like they have a lot to prove after this championship run, especially with a lot of things that's been going on this offseason. Jaylen Brown doesn't get called into the Olympics. Jason Tatum doesn't play 2 games in the Olympics. Everybody's saying Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown had some of the worst finals performances as a duo. And coming into this season, they still have a lot to prove. Coming from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, who still feel like they have a lot to show to the NBA. So I still think they can hit the ground running this season. I mean, you're going to lose Kristaps Porzingis for maybe 2 months this season, but I think the Celtics were 14-1 without him. Like I think the Celtics still are going to have probably the best starting lineup in the league once he comes back. There's still a top 3 starting lineup in the league without him. They work so well together with their 5-out offense. They're so well coached. They're one of the best, if not the best, defensive team in the league. They're one of the best, if not the best, offensive team in the league. There's not much weaknesses you can point out with this Boston Celtics team. And I think over the regular season, they're still going to be the 1 seed. I still think they can win 60 games. They're going to have a lot to show this season. And one thing about Jason Tatum that I do not think, I don't think he's been fairly criticized this offseason. Now, one thing I will say about Jason Tatum is the jump shot was not there in the playoffs. It was not there in the Olympics. And that is something that is going to have to be worked on. If you guys have seen on Twitter, Jason Tatum has changed his jump shot. The little it's not there anymore. It's not there anymore. So that's something that we should be looking forward to. But Jason Tatum has a player, if you saw him in the 2022 finals versus the 2024 finals, has made an increase or has gotten better in a lot of things that you walked away from the 2022 series saying he needs to improve on. Jason Tatum got better at reading defenses. He got better at making the proper pass. He got better at playmaking. He got better at when to shoot, when to pass. He got better at when to take over, when to not take over. And I think if Jason Tatum would have came into this series forcing a lot of shots that he felt like he needed to make because he had a point to prove, it could have cost them the series maybe. And it just I think he took the proper route to this NBA finals. And it's like, hey, I do not have to play the best for my team to win. If I'm setting my team up for the best shots they can possibly get, which is me driving downhill, collapsing the defense, swinging it out to the corner, letting Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps, Al Horford, Sam Hauser, let these guys get their open shots. But getting back to this season, I think the Celtics are going to have a lot to prove, and I think they're still going to be the top team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, you said that extremely well. I don't know if I could have said it better. I think we agree on pretty much everything right there. To a T. Like they're absolutely going to be, even if you want to say slightly above this 60. People are saying that Porzingis being out a couple months could be kind of a determining factor in their regular season win total. I don't think so. And even if you want to say the Celtics could have championship fatigue or not be as hungry or this and that, like the regular season isn't what we're talking about in that regard. It's going to be the playoffs if that's the case. And I think the Celtics, just any given night, like you said, even with Horford instead of Porzingis, they're going to be better than 9 out of 10 teams they play. I mean, and that's on an off night. Like they're just so fluid. They're so versatile. Their lineup is so, like you said, there's almost zero weaknesses on this team, even without Porzingis. It's just so, harmonizing this lineup and night to night, like in the regular season in particular. I mean, just good luck. Good luck, beating this team as far as all 29 teams go. Good luck beating this team, more than, 25 times. I think, I'm going to predict at least marginally over 58. I would say around 60, like you said, even with the Porzingis missed time. You mentioned how Jason Tatum is getting dragged all over social media, unjustly, I believe. And he's going to have a lot to prove this year. And I think he has a monster season. Yeah, I predict them to win at least 60 games for the Celtics, no question.
100%, man. And I don't like the Jason Tatum slander, especially when they try to clown him for how he reacted to winning a championship. Like every player that dreamed of going to the NBA, you're so overcome with emotion. I don't blame him. I don't blame him. If
It,
you're telling me you watched basketball, you've dreamed of winning a championship for your franchise, being the best player on that team, having the best series for your team, and you win a championship, something you've dreamed of your entire life, and now you're clowning him for that.
so all the people that were clowning him for that were all the ones saying that he'll never win a championship because he's not the guy. He doesn't have it. It doesn't know like clutch gene. He disappears out of games. Those were those people. And then once he wins, and maybe slightly underperforms in the efficiency department as far as shooting the ball goes. Oh well, now he doesn't react well to the championship the way I want him to. And Jalen Brown carried him, and he played on a stacked team. It's like this guy can't win. How many other under 30 players that win a finals as the best player on their team, despite not maybe performing their best in the series, is going to be getting this amount of criticism? Like this guy just won the finals. Like, can we just like what is it's almost like they're putting it as a mark on his resume as opposed to a really good thing, obviously. So
Literally, like
crazy.
we've seen that. We've seen it twice. I've seen it twice in my lifetime where players winning a championship has hurt their legacy. Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
And it's not even like, in the end of the day, Kevin Durant won. He played extremely well when he won. Everybody's just mad because of the team. And
Yeah, and
then
this and like that, I can somewhat understand where people are coming from. Like, again, I don't think it's a negative thing on their resume. No question, Kevin Durant was the best player you know for his team in that series, despite having prime Steph Curry and playing out of his mind in those two final series. But I can maybe empathize a little bit with the sentiment that you know you could say, oh well, KD chose to go there and they were going to win anyway. And I think there is maybe a little merit to that. The teams they played against was kind of, at least in 2018, it was just LeBron, and a bunch of role players. But at the end of the day, Kevin Durant showed up. It's the same thing where, Jason Tatum, this is a, negative thing on his resume, somehow winning a championship if you don't do it the right way, or, if you don't do it in a way, or if you don't react to it in a way that people like, then somehow it's a negative thing. This guy is under 30, coming off his first finals ring, and I believe it'll be the first of many, many, by the way, for the
100%.
Celtics, who could become the newest dynasty. And yeah, I don't get it, man. I really don't. And I'm a Sixers
Yeah.
fan, but when I see players, yeah, so I don't like the Celtics. I don't like Tatum, maybe more than anyone. But like it just doesn't make sense to me. Like
Yeah.
you have to come, if you're going to criticize someone, at least be objective about it, and come from a place of you know constructiveness, I guess. But these people just don't like him, and so they're going to find any reason they can to pick at him.
So the next team we're going to be talking about in the Atlantic Division, you may see that team on D Have's wall in his background, the Philadelphia 76ers, who brought in Paul George this offseason. They drafted my favorite rookie coming into this season, Jared McCain. They also brought in guys like Caleb Martin. I think that's the right one. Caleb
Yep,
Martin.
Caleb.
They brought in Eric Gordon. They also brought in Andre Drummond. They definitely rounded out their roster with all the cap space they had. They extended Tyrese Maxey. They extended Joel Embiid. This team is gonna be good, man. This team is gonna be good. I'm gonna let you start this one off, man.
Hey, I appreciate it. Like I said, any chance I get, the Sixers. I have never been more excited for a season. What was the over under exactly?
The over under for the Philadelphia 76ers. Let me find this right now. I said Phoenix. Philadelphia 76ers 52 and a half. 52 and a half.
Well, let me tell you, we're gonna win 60. No, I'm kidding. So this 52 and a half is pretty reasonable. I might go. Wow, that's a tough one to predict on the spot here. I think it could go. This is a very volatile prediction here, huh? Like where if Joel Embiid, and we certainly know he's going to be missing some games. Paul George has a history of not playing, well over 70 games throughout the last few years. I believe last year he played more than
Yeah.
usual, but the team, like you said, is well rounded. I don't know. I'd say maybe slightly under if I had to put money on it, just because I think that's the most probable. But I can also see a scenario where the Sixers click on all cylinders. Embiid stays healthy, hopefully, knock on wood for me. And they win somewhere close to like where the Knicks would, around 55, 57 games if everything goes right and everybody's healthy. But I would go slightly under. But here's the thing, the Sixers, Daryl Morey has just done maybe the best job anyone could in one summer. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They seem to be pretty set on every position, backup and starters. Their lineup is really versatile on both ends. They have the star power, the firepower. It's just going to be, excuse me, for us in the regular season, it's going to be come down to health, and in the playoffs is where Sixers fans really want to see some improvement here. And so the regular season, I'm not too concerned with, as long as we get a top 5, top 4 seed. We don't get too many bad matchups here, but it's just really getting everybody healthy for the playoffs, namely Joel Embiid. But yeah, I think having one of the things I really like about this team in particular, as far as the Sixers as opposed to years past, is having a competent backup 5 for when Joel Embiid goes down. We saw them bring in Andre Drummond for the second time. Hopefully, he's not traded at the deadline this year like he was last time, and he is able to step in and start for a guy like Embiid when he needs a rest day on a back-to-back pretty competently. And so, you have the interior presence, you have the star power, the firepower, a lot more, wing versatility on this team. Like you said, the backcourt has a ton of shooting and floor space ability. Eric Gordon, Tyrese Maxey, Kyle Lowry, who's going to bring a lot of grit and toughness. So there's just plenty to like about my team right now, but health is the biggest factor. I'd say slightly under 52 and a half, but that's just because of injuries.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I would say anywhere between 49 and 51 for the 76ers. And it may not even just be injuries, but it's maybe just the fact of trying to prevent those injuries as much as possible. So if we got a back to back and we got the Bucks one night and maybe the Raptors the next, yeah, Joel, you're gonna sit against the
Paul
Raptors.
George too, yeah.
Yeah, so I completely understand that. As long as you guys are winning games, top 4 seed in the East, 49 and 33, I think can get you a top 4
Yep.
seed in
Yep.
the East. I don't see that being an issue, because in these top 4 teams, I think that between Boston, I think between New York, Milwaukee, and Philly, one of these teams are going to have to see Boston in the ECF. I still think the 76ers have a good matchup against the Knicks. I still think the Philadelphia 76ers can have a good matchup against the Bucks. So to have a fully healthy, ready to go Joel Embiid, which is something that we've been asking for the past few years, but now you have Paul George and Tyrese Maxey to add on top of that. I think they can definitely create some matchup problems, especially how Tyrese Maxey plays off of Joel Embiid, how he can play with the ball in his hand, with the ball out of his hand. He can shoot, and he's extremely quick. He's extremely
Oh
quick.
yeah.
He can get downhill with the best of them. And showing in this playoffs, I think he averaged 30. I think he averaged 30 on solid efficiency in the
Yeah,
playoffs. He
this
was
is the
phenomenal.
second year in a row where he's led the team in playoff points per game. And one thing I do want to mention about the Sixers this season that doesn't seem to be brought up much, and it's easy to forget, but having Coach Nick Nurse as our coach is a really big deal. This is a guy that's won a championship. He's known to be one of the most creative and best defensive coaches in the league. He's really gonna throw everything at the wall, see what sticks for the playoffs throughout the regular season. He's not afraid to switch up lineups, switch things up. having watched Doc Rivers coach my team for a few years it's a very different feeling watching Coach Nurse, who you're pretty confident is going to figure out who to put on the floor at certain times and when to rest guys and when to put the young guys in, blah blah blah. So I think Coach Nurse just being a championship level coach, having someone on the team like Kyle Lowry who could be seen as an extension of Coach Nurse, this is a really kind of big deal that I think elevates the Sixers just a little bit more than years past with someone like Doc Rivers or Coach Brett Brown.
100%, man. 100%. Now we got two teams. We got two teams left in the Atlantic Division. These are the two teams that probably won't make the playoffs. We have a Brooklyn Nets team and a Toronto Raptors team. We're going to speak on the Toronto Raptors fairly quickly. I think we can definitely deep dive into the Toronto Raptors, but may not be as in depth as the Sixers, Knicks, especially with the news around the Knicks of these past few days. So with the Toronto Raptors, their over under starting up at the start of the season is 30.5, which I think is kind of just right. I can see a world where Scotty Barnes shows the world that he can be a number one guy and they win 33 games. But I definitely can see a world where that jump shot is starting to be inconsistent again. Same with RJ Barrett, and they can fall down to 24. But my thing with this Toronto Raptors team is I just don't think they have the talent to be a bottom feeder team, especially in the Eastern Conference. I definitely think they have the talent on the team to produce wins. RJ Barrett this season gave you about, or especially with the Toronto Raptors, gave you about 22 points per game, 62% true shooting, for 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He really flipped his career around in Toronto, and I think that it helped him moving to Toronto and getting out of the spotlight of New York, because you were the number 3 pick in New York. And then, especially when you look around you, some of the top guys like Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, these are not homegrown guys. You're a homegrown top 3 pick in the NBA draft, especially in New York. That could be very troublesome for him. So I definitely think him being in Toronto definitely helps him out. And as for Scotty Barnes, this is a guy that averaged about 20 points per game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. He still, in my opinion, shows signs of he still, in my opinion, needs improvement when it comes to creating his own shot in the pick and roll, in the post, in isolation. He's a below league average when it comes to those aspects, but this is a guy that can do a lot. He has the potential to be a great versatile defender. He can play make, he can rebound. If we can get him to really be consistent as an offensive player, that's a world where I can see Scotty Barnes becoming a number one on a team that is going to build through him.
Absolutely. I think, around 30 wins, somewhere around there makes sense for the Raptors. Like you said, they're certainly more talented than some of these, 14, 15, 13 ranked team. They're going to be somewhere, anywhere from I would say the 10 seed to like the 13th seed, I think is fair for them. Like you said, Scotty Barnes has plenty of, things to prove, but he also has plenty of things that we've already seen that, you could really say in a couple of years, this guy could be one of the best two-way players in the league. I mean, like you said, to average near, 20, 10, and 5 on super good defense, like it's just really rare to see a player with his skill set. Have to see him be a little bit more consistent, but this is the guy that's going to lead this team next season. As far as the guys they brought in from New York, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, these guys are going to have, phenomenal years, in my opinion. Like you said, Coach Tibbs, he really likes to, put players in certain roles. He's not the best with young players. And so we saw these guys in very different roles that were able to, really take on bigger roles and work through mistakes. And so we're really going to see what, they're capable of in more of an expanded type of net for their skills and stuff like that. And so another thing, just real quick to note for the Raptors is I love their big man situation. When you have Jakob Pertl and Kelly Olynyk, at the 2 5s, I think that's super super dynamic. As far as Kelly Olynyk playing great with the Raptors post trade from Utah last season, and that is an interior force along with Scotty Barnes in the front court. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they have one of the more you know heavy and just interior presences of any like lower tier team in the league. And so I think that could elevate their team as far as ceiling goes on, two-way bigs.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be interesting to see what Scotty Barnes does this season, because one thing about him, even if he isn't the best 3-point shooter, he's gonna pull it. And I'm definitely impressed with that. As long as he is willing to take those shots and he's willing to get better, Scotty Barnes is gonna be a guy anybody would want on their team.
Oh, he's a
So
dog. He's got the mentality for sure. Yeah.
100%. So the last team we're going to be talking about is the Brooklyn Nets. This team is projected, according to ESPN's over under, to have 19 and a half wins. That is the line for the Brooklyn Nets this season. I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it's crazy. I think there's a world where they can win 17 games. So if I was a betting man, I would take the under. I would take the under. I mean, this Brooklyn Nets team, there's definitely some signs, you know, and I would definitely be a lot more critical if this team didn't have their picks for the next 2 years, but they definitely made the right decision on sending out Mikal Bridges, bringing in 5 first-round picks from the New York Knicks, getting their original picks back from the Rockets. So now you kind of like start fresh, if you have the control of what team you want to build in Brooklyn. There are a few guys that you may want to keep around, like Nicholas Claxton, who you just re-signed. Cam Thomas to me is very confusing. I think this is the year that we're going to see what he can improve on. And when a lot of people talk about Cam Thomas, he's going to give you 25 a game. He's going to give you 27 a game. But the thing that I'm worried about the most, if I'm a coach for the Brooklyn Nets or I'm a GM for the Brooklyn Nets, can Cam Thomas improve on his playmaking and his defense? We know he can put the ball in the basket. We know he is gifted at putting the ball in the basket. Can he be self-aware enough to get better at the playmaking and the defensive aspects so we can truly have him as a stepping stone for this franchise? Because the 25 games is going to be great and all, but when you're around better players and you're not getting the ball as much, and this is a guy that needs to get in rhythm, I just don't think there's a world where he can be like a high level starter if all you can do is score, especially in today's NBA where some of the top players in the NBA are not one dimensional anymore. We look at some of the better players in the league; they always have something to add on to it. Luka's a great scorer and playmaker. Nikola Jokic, scorer, playmaker. Anthony Davis, great offensive and defensive player. Giannis, dominant down low, dominant on defense. There's always another aspect to some of these top guys' game, and I just think being a one-dimensional player is not. I think that's starting to take like a downfall for people in the NBA. The guys like Zach Levine, the guys like Cam Thomas. Like we're seeing right now, Zach Levine can't find anywhere to go on top of his contract and him just being a one-dimensional player that's going to give you 25 plus.
Yeah, well, that's very well said. And it's one thing to be a player, that can only score the basketball, like that's your biggest thing. That's phasing out as it is. It's another thing to be a small guard that can only score the basketball. That's about as phased out as it gets. We just don't see that type of player, have that type of impact anymore on winning. You're not saying Cam Thomas can. He's certainly still a young player with plenty to grow on, I'm sure. But like you said, the playmaking and the defense has to be the priority. Nick Claxton is obviously the center of this team's future. You extend him on that big contract. Certainly a player you want to build with. Player to watch out for on the Nets for me is Noah Clowney. I think he's going to have a great season this year. Maybe their starting power forward. I think he has a lot of floor spacing upside next to a guy like Claxton. Could have a breakout two-way season for Noah Clowney. Got to keep an eye on. Not too many people are familiar with. But as far as their win total goes, I think was it 19 and a half?
Yep.
Yeah, I would bet on the under. I think it's going to be, I personally think the Nets are going to have maybe the worst record in the league as far as both
100%. I think
conferences.
so.
As far as the East, they're certainly my 15th ranked team. It's maybe you could say it's a little close with someone like Washington, but I just think they are by far the least wins in this conference next season. But not to say that's a bad thing. That's obviously what they're trying to do, and you agreed that it's the right thing to do, right direction to go in. They've certainly needed to go in any direction, and I do think they're making the right call. This is not a mark on how they're running their franchise. I think they're stepping in the right direction, so it's not a bad thing. They're losing the most games is actually a good thing. But yeah, I would say, like you said, anywhere from 15 to 17 seems fair to me for sure. Also, Ben Simmons. We'll have to see what happens with that. But I would predict
100%.
doesn't really move the needle for me as far as predictions go.
All right, so a couple weeks ago, I was scrolling through Twitter and I just found this stat when Claxton and Clowney are on the floor together, and I saved it because I knew I would need it one day. I knew I would need it. So it says this
Perfect.
is per NBA University from Twitter. You know they have
Oh
great,
yeah,
great
great.
stats. Noah Clowney and Nick Claxton form a nasty defensive front court miraculously, plus 5.4 per 100 when they shared the court together in a
Wow.
suboptimal context. Both incredibly mobile, effectively guarding on the perimeter and protecting the rim when being mean dunkers on the other end. I think that defensive pairing, I think that could be something like Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, maybe
Could
to a
be. Yeah.
lesser extent, but to
Yeah.
have two lengthy, agile big men defending that can defend the rim and play out on the perimeter. And Nick Claxton is great in transition. He's
Oh yeah.
fantastic in transition.
Yep.
So that's something to look forward to. I think what's his name? Jalen Wilson. He was the summer league MVP. I
Yes.
think he
Yes.
has a great shot. I think Dariq Whitehead has a great outside shot as well. He's shown signs as a solid defender in college. I would love to see him pick that back up in the NBA. So there
Trendon
are some
Watford
small,
is a guy I like a lot, kind of a
yeah,
utility piece. I think he's good on the wing, but like you said, Clowney. Another thing to note is, he works super well offensively as well. The
yeah,
defense is certainly there. This guy's a breakout candidate for me. Should have put him in the breakout candidate video we did together, but
yeah.
just didn't quite make it. But his floor spacing ability, we talked about earlier, how Gobert and Cat kind of fare. Obviously this is a much minor scale to that, but I do think there is a lot to like about this big man tandem, and then Dayron Sharp as your backup five.
Yeah,
Certainly a nice young piece. So yeah, the Brooklyn Nets a lot to look forward to, but you want to lose as many as possible this season.
and I think they'll be very, very active at the deadline. There's guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder. These guys are going to be wanted at the trade deadline. There's like
100%. Yeah, at
there's
least two of those
already,
guys are gone, no question.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Like let's say somebody is down, somebody's hurt around the trade deadline. All right, I know Brooklyn for a first round pick maybe in 29, they'll give us Dorian Finney-Smith. Like that's and I can understand it on both sides. Dorian Finney-Smith is a solid defender. Cam Johnson is a great shooter. Dennis Schroeder is a guy who can be a great rotational guard, who can guard at the point of attack, can make the proper play with the ball in his hand. The Nets have some things they can use to look towards the future, and they really flipped their situation in a matter of one offseason. So I can't do nothing but praise them for that. I mean, they're going to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
hot garbage this year, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's
That's
good. That's what
okay.
they want to be. Yeah, they just want to learn about their team. But just one more quick thing. No, I keep doing this. I'm sorry, but you said this would be quick. But
Oh no, you're
as far
good.
as Dorian Finney-Smith, there's been a lot of rumors to my Sixers as far as KJ Martin was extended on our team to a balloon contract, which basically means he signed for much more than his value on the market would dictate. And a lot of people speculate that since he can't become trade eligible till January, Dorian Finney-Smith has been linked to many rumors about the Sixers and KJ Martin trades involving a draft pick of some sort. Could be we have a lot of Clippers tradable first round picks from the James Harden trade, but certainly I think Dorian Finney-Smith will be someone Daryl Morey looks for to kind of fill up this power forward issue we have with this lineup. But yeah, most of those guys are going to be gone. Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, all serviceable players, veteran players that don't fit the timeline of this team. Yeah, the Nets, they'll move on from these guys for sure. But I just want to note that about Finney-Smith real quick.
Yeah, that's a beautiful fit. He can play the three, can play the four, or if you even want to bring him off your bench, I think that's a great move for the 76ers.
Yeah, he'd
All
fit well
right.
with Embiid too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that has been the first episode of the new season of Ball Dominant. The season is right around the corner. I am very excited. Content is about to start ramping up because October 1st is tomorrow, the official month of NBA basketball, where NFL is probably flushed right out of my system and we just get
Mm.
right to basketball. Um, I'm very excited, man. You're gonna be getting multiple episodes of Ball Dominant a week, maybe
Ooh,
three at minimum.
make sure
Three
you guys
at minimum.
subscribe.
Yes, sir. And make sure you go to the description and find D Have's YouTube and his Twitter in the link in the description
Oh,
below.
thank you,
I
man. Thank you. Yeah.
appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate D Have for coming on again. And I'm out, man. Peace.